Please be seated. Okay, good evening, everybody. Welcome to tonight's meeting of Middlesbrough Council. First item on the agenda, apologies for absence. Do we have any?
We do, Chair. We have apologies from Councillor Arundale, Brunton Dobson, Davison, Lawton, McTighe, McIntyre, Saunders, Councillor Jacob Young, and Sharrocks.
Okay, can we note those? Thank you. Agenda item 2, declarations of interest. Do we have any? Agenda item 3, minutes of the previous meetings of the Council, 17th of October, an extraordinary meeting on 17th of October. Can we agree those minutes as accurate? Okay, thank you. Agenda item 4, announcements, communications. I have 2 announcements for this meeting. It is with great sadness that I have to inform you of the death of Councillor Peter Purvis, who was elected in 2007 and who was councillor for the former Thorntree ward and more lately the Brambles and Thorntree ward. Peter passed away on the 25th of October 2018, aged 79. Peter was a popular councillor and a community stalwart. He was an active member of the Community Ventures Middlesbrough and also sat on the River Tees Port Health Authority, as well as serving as Vice Chair of the Council's Corporate Affairs and Audit Committee. Peter was also a member of the Overview and Scrutiny Board and the Adult Health and Social Care Scrutiny Panel. He was a great advocate for his ward and for the town as a whole. It is also with sadness that I have to inform you of the death of former councillor Peter Sanderson, who was a councillor for the Nunthorpe ward from 2003 to 2015. Peter passed away on the 15th of November, aged 71. Peter was a member of the Planning and Development Committee and also Vice Chair of the Economic Regeneration and Transport Scrutiny Panel. Please stand with me now for a minute's silence. Thank you. Okay, agenda item 5, questions from members of the public. The first set of questions are for Councillor Charlie Rooney. First question from Councillor Rathmell. Sorry. Oh, do apologise. Right. We have two questions from members of the public. First question is from Councillor A. Walker, and it's for the Executive Member for Economic Development and Infrastructure. Mr. Walker, I invite you to read out your question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Councillor Young, the Gazette Live published an article on the 9th of November 2018 regarding traffic counting wires or tubes that have reappeared on Middlesbrough roads. Please can the Executive Member for Infrastructure explain why Middlesbrough Council has recently put traffic counters in place on local roads. These include, but are not limited to, Dixon's Bank, Stainton Way and Martin Road, close to James Cook University Hospital, to gain greater understanding of the traffic flows. After already having made the decision in July to waste 1.7 million of public funds on additional lanes at the Southern Cross Junction, relying solely on the data available to the Council's consultants, Ove, Arup and Partners. Data which resulted in the series of warnings by Arup about this project, which the Council has been overlooking. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Walker. Councillor Young, I invite you to respond.
Thank you, Chair. Firstly, we'd just like to say that Arup actually recommended the proposed road widening scheme rather than warning against it. And we regularly use traffic counting wires and tubes as part of our overall traffic management to feed information into our traffic management programme, and we'll continue to do so. We'll do that regardless of the programmes that we already have in place.
Thank you. The second question is from Mr. McClintock. Unfortunately, Mr. McClintock is not able to attend the meeting. He's asked that I read the question out for you, Councillor Young. Would Councillor Young please reiterate his endorsement of the statement in the Nunthorpe Grange Design Code, Draft 5, 28th of June 2018, that the site will not be brought forward until an agreement on the provision of a park and ride facility has been secured, or the Longlands Road to Ladgate Lane Road has been secured and a timetable for implementation agreed. I ask this because Persimmon Homes Teesside is currently consulting on its proposals to build approximately 115 residential properties on a first phase of the Nunthorpe Grange development. Councillor Young.
Thanks, Chair. I will be providing a written response to Mr. McClintock.
Okay, thank you. Right, the actual agenda that went out was slightly incorrect. There was it had the Deputy Mayor and Executive Member reports ahead of the Mayor's statement and report. So with your agreement, I will invite, just move those two agenda items round and invite the Mayor to make his statement and report. Mayor Budd.
First of all, just a clarification really of a position which I think a number of people who have a lot of time for were somewhat disturbed about. This follows an article in the Gazette which was about a combined authority meeting where the process, chemicals and energy sector action plan was agreed. And the article went on after reporting that to quote the Tees Valley Mayor's support for fracking. These were two separate items. To be clear, fracking was not mentioned in the report, it was not discussed, and it certainly wasn't agreed. So just to make it clear, there is no support from me or any other local authority leader for fracking. I think the confusion rose from a report. And if I might mention austerity again, which of course we believe is coming to an end, but there's not much sign of it at the moment. Just three particular items on that, because the statistics, the comments, and so on keep coming in. You may well have seen a statement by Professor Philip Alston, the UN Special Rapporteur on extreme poverty and human rights. If you haven't read it, I believe you should. It's not very long. And I'd like to just read out a little bit from the beginning of it and a little bit from the end, because it is very, very stark, and it makes you wonder about which country it is being reported. So from his introduction, if I could read, The UK is the world's 5th largest economy, and it contains many areas of immense wealth. Its capital is a leading centre of global finance. Its entrepreneurs are innovative and agile, and despite the current political turmoil, it has a system of government that rightly remains the envy of the world. It thus seems patently unjust and contrary to British values that so many people are living in poverty. This is obvious to anybody who opens their eyes to see the immense growth in food banks and the queues waiting outside them. The people sleeping rough in the streets, the growth of homelessness, the sense of despair that leads even the government to appoint a minister for suicide prevention and civil society to report on the depths. To report on the depth of unheard levels of loneliness and isolation. Local authorities, especially in England, which perform vital roles in providing a real social safety net, have been gutted by a series of government policies. And he goes on to describe in some considerable detail about the effects of what he sees as government policies. The conclusion he comes to, which I think fits with something that I and we have often said in this chamber since 2010, the experience of the United Kingdom, especially since 2010, underscores the conclusion that poverty is a political choice. Austerity could easily have been spared the poor if the political will had existed to do so. Resources were available to the Treasury at the last budget that could have transformed the situation for millions of people living in poverty, but the political choice was made to fund tax cuts for the wealthy instead. Now, that's something that I and we have said for some considerable time now, even though I've got to say the government has taken no notice whatsoever. It's interesting but very sad that somebody from the United Nations has to come to our country and tell us that. Things have moved in utterly the wrong direction since 2010. Another aspect of austerity, and I'm sure you will have heard this recently, recent statements from Mike Veal, the Chief Constable, about the inadequacy of funding for Cleveland Police. And that reminds us that we are not the only sufferers from austerity. The Cleveland Police Service has been decimated by it. There are now 500 less police officers and 50 less PCSOs. And as Mike Veal has now said, to pretend that that doesn't affect the service is wrong. Now, I would like to compliment him for coming out and saying something which is very awkward for police officers to say, but it's nevertheless very true. Just last week, I and 75 other council leaders wrote to the Minister to call for increased funding in what was going to be tomorrow's local government settlement. It's now been put off for a week. I think there's something beginning with Brexit, I think it is, which seems to be getting in the way of every other decision. So we're probably still a week away from that. We've mentioned yet again, as the LGA continue to do, the pressure on local government finances, the pressure on children's services, pressure on adult social care. And if austerity has really come to an end, then we should see at least the cancellation of some of the cuts which have been planned for some considerable time. And it will be really interesting to see whether austerity has really come to an end when we get the figures, I hope, next week. I hope these aren't going to arrive just before Christmas, as has occasionally happened in the past, conveniently. So I'm sure when we do get the figures, we'll make sure that everybody is aware of them and comment on them. That's all for now. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Mayor. Any questions, comments for the Mayor? Councillor Biswas.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, could I congratulate the Mayor to bring up that report. It's absolutely devastating to read that report. At first, I was thinking, is this report is really meant to be for Great Britain or is it for a third world country? I was really confused. Regarding the austerity, I remember very well in this chamber, right from the beginning, the first meeting when you talked about the austerity, I said that it will not work. Simple as that. 10 years later, the government are so adamant to say that austerity is over. Now, I don't know whether all of them need to go to the spec service to see it. I don't know. So that's beside the point. I think only one point I would like to, everyone knows about austerity. I would like to speak about something else, which is called universal credit. That's another something what this government is bringing out. No way that will also work. Every department, every think tank, they're all saying that please, please, please revert the universal credit. I'll give you one simple example. I see it over the road almost every week. And the one scenario, it happens when people goes to prison for a short time. Unfortunately, some people don't go there just because they like to go there. But it's the way the system is, they brought them over, and because of the judicial system, we cannot avoid the system to send them to prison. When they go to prison, their social security benefit system totally changes. After 2 weeks, when they are out, they don't have any money at all. And that takes, through the new universal credit, 6 weeks before it even hits their bank account. Some people don't even know how to control their bank account. Imagine the people who cannot run 1 day, give them the money for all 4 weeks, and then wait for other 4 weeks for your money to arrive. They finish that in 1 day sometime, and the rest of the 3 weeks, they have no food, no place, no shelter, absolutely nothing. Going back to the prison, when they come out, because they've been to food banks so many times, they're not allowed to go. Because the maximum you can go to the food bank is about 4 times a year. And these people have no food at all. They go to the shops without thinking anything, they just pinch the food, and then they get caught. They're brought back to the court. We have no option but to either send them back to the prison. So they're simply because they said, look, my universal credit, first of all, is so complicated, and secondly, we will not get our money till 4 weeks. So what do you do? You send us back to prison, thank you very much. They even thank us to send them back to prison because at least they know they will have food on their plate. Otherwise, they will not have any food. And sometimes government tells us, please do not send them to prison as much as you can. So if we keep them out from the prison, they go to the shops again and pinch because they have no alternative whatsoever. I don't know any of you actually seen the new form to fill for the universal credit. It's absolutely horrendous, 64-page to be precise. It's our labor leaders keep on saying that please rethink, universal credit will not work. It will be just like the poll tax again. But given the government who it is, do they actually care? Or do they care for the poor? I'm afraid to say they do not, and they will not, and they never ever will. And the sooner they go, the better for all the people of this country. So that's all I had to say, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Okay, nobody else indicated they wish to talk. We'll move on. Agenda item 7, Deputy Mayor and Executive Member reports. First set of questions are for Councillor Charlie Rooney. First question on Centre Square, Councillor Rathmell. Councillor.
We're still waiting with bated breath, for you to announce that you've managed to secure one new organisation to rent an office in the new office blocks. Can you confirm if you've managed to secure any tenants at all, excluding Middlesbrough Council, for any of the new office blocks? Thank you.
Excuse me, Councillor Rooney.
Thank you, Chair. Well, I wouldn't exclude Middlesbrough Council because we are going to be a tenant in one of the blocks. We're going to be a landlord in the other one. And as I understand it to date, although we can't publish details of who's interested in the places, we've got more people interested than we've got square footage to let. There's been interest expressed in Melrose House, and indeed developer interest in the car parks at the other end of Centre Square as well. So the whole development is attracting inward interest, and no doubt we'll have something to announce in the new year.
Thank you, Councillor. Second question for Councillor Rooney is from Councillor Story, Railway Station. Councillor Story.
Thanks, Chair. It's great news to see the rail station development developing as quickly as it is. I think it's a good example of this council leading a major project, not just important for our town and our city, but also for the whole of the Tees Valley and the wider North East. This is a Middlesbrough Council-led project. It's one of the things I think needs to be stressed that people remember. This is a Middlesbrough Council master plan, which has been developed by the Labour Executive, but also in conjunction with hard-working officers in the Regen Department, who've been working alongside Andy MacDonald, the MP for Middlesbrough, who's also the Shadow Transport Secretary, and he's been working very closely with officers, and I know there are going to be meetings with Network Rail and other partners to make sure that this gets progressed even further as quickly as it can be. I would like to mention the support that TVCA have provided, which is obviously important and welcome. They have put money in to support the project, and that's good. I think that the Mayor of the Combined Authority seems to treat that money as if it belongs to him, and it's coming out of his personal chequebook. It's not. It belongs to everyone in the Tees Valley. And that money is there to do exactly what it's doing with the station. It's there to support projects led by the constituent local authorities. And they're doing their job. And what we don't do is take victory laps and try and get garlands of flowers for doing our jobs. That's what they do. And it's good that they're doing it, and we're pleased. And we should be all very supportive of what's going on. But it's just a great thing, and it's going to be a tremendous transport hub for the Tees Valley when it's complete. So congratulations to all involved, and I hope it will continue to progress in a positive way.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Rooney.
Well, thank you for that. There's not a lot else to say, except we are investing and continue to invest in the public realm, and we are grateful for our money from Tees Valley conduited through from the government to that end. We do have a meeting with concerned parties, which our MP has helped to facilitate on Friday in York, and we're hoping to make progress on further improvements to the station from then.
Thank you, Councillor. Next question is for Councillor Rostron, from Councillor Walters, Grandparents Plus. Councillor Walters.
Thank you. I was very pleased to see the report of a funding award from Sport England Families Fund to Grandparents Plus to get children and their grandparents physically active. The report says that work will be with 472 kinship carers, and that about 1,200 children in South Tees area are living with carers other than their parents for a whole range of complicated and unhappy reasons. This project is marvellous, great stuff, and very important to get children and their grandparents physically active. But I should say, I believe that the numbers cited are actually an underestimate of the issues around kinship care. And I just wanted to take the opportunity, because this has been reported upon, to urge everyone present to be aware of the needs of the children and the grandchildren involved in these care arrangements, and to be alert always to the support and the advice mechanisms available to them. For example, through Grandparents Plus and other organisations. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Rostron.
Well, thank you for that, Councillor Walters. I agree with everything you've said. Good news is that the project workers came to work in the Live Well Centre yesterday, and they're getting set up because the project itself will run from April next year until September 2021. And I think it's significant that most of our kinship carers are grandparents. Some are other relatives, but they do tend to be poorer and not in as good a health as many other people. So anything we can do to help them with the health and well-being is good news, I think, for us and for them. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Next question is for Councillor Carr. It's from Councillor Mohan. Ofsted-focused visit, August 2018. Councillor Mohan.
Cheers. Thank you, Chair. Councillor Carr, if I can ask you, it's great to see the Ofsted report finally published in the Executive Members Report. I do have the fully fledged Ofsted report here, and I'm very concerned actually there's quite a few excerpts that aren't included in the Executive report. So if I can quote from the Ofsted report, there have been considerable weaknesses in the quality of frontline practice with children and families in this part of the service. This has resulted in piecemeal decision-making with insufficient information, poor recording and a lack of consistent management oversight. It's also failing to mention Ofsted's view of the improvement plan. Again, I'll quote from the Ofsted letter. The improvement plan does not always sufficiently focus on the improvements necessary to strengthen frontline practice and on improving children's experiences and their outcomes. Really, it's just to say, how can we have confidence in reports that are published by the Executive? One child that we, as members, let down is one child too much.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Carr.
Thank you, Chair. There's at least one sentence I can agree with there, that it's the responsibility of ourselves as a children's care department, along with our partners, to make sure that no children have any difficulty or any problems. And one of the outcomes of this particular Ofsted report was to confirm exactly that all of the children in Middlesbrough's care are safe, that none of the decisions taken at the front door, which is where decisions are taken about the sort of care provision that may or may not be provided for children, all of the decisions are the correct ones. And if they read the report carefully, as the councillor has indicated, I think she'll find that that's the case. It's a bit unfortunate that in reading some of the sentences out of the Ofsted letter, some of them have been taken out of context, and one in particular, the first one, there have been considerable weaknesses in the quality of frontline practice with children and families in this part of the service. That is indeed one of the sentences. I think if you look at the grammar, it's talking about the past tense. There have in the past been considerable weaknesses. What the councillor didn't go on to read out was the rest of the paragraph, which says, a new director and a new chief executive have led a programme of improvement which has begun to strengthen the support being provided for children. The local authority has provided additional investment for children's services, and in the main, detailed plans are in place to address the issues. I think what the Ofsted visit confirms is that there has been a lot of work, a lot of improvements. In the report I indicated, there are a number of the good points that the Ofsted letter identified are in the report to members. It also does indicate what the weaknesses are, and it does say that an additional action plan and improvement plan is in place. And in fact, if I may sort of add, that part of the improvement plan that we've got includes a new approach called Believe in Families, which is working with families and indeed kinship carers, bearing in mind what we've just been hearing, to ensure that decisions about children are taken involving the whole of the family. A strategic partnership board chaired by the chief executive is holding partner agencies to account. Next April, there will be a South Tees front door. We will be working with Redcar and Cleveland Council and all of the other agencies, the police and the health authority, to have a South Tees front door, which will go live in April 2019. We are introducing what's called a sign of safety model of risk management in the front door and indeed across the whole of the children's care department. And there's increased social work management and administrative capacity being applied. So I think it's absolutely fair enough to say that there are some issues that have been identified with the front door, which we are aware of. There is an improvement plan. Right during the inspection, additional measures were taken, and the action plan, which is a separate thing from the improvement plan, the action plan, which has been approved by Ofsted, is now making sure that all of the areas that have been identified are being addressed. It would be helpful if councillors were a bit less disingenuous in quoting from these reports, however.
Thank you, Councillor. Next set of questions. Okay, you'll have to be quick though, because we have got a lot of questions and I don't normally allow supplementaries, but I'll give you the very quick
really
one.
Quick. It is an Ofsted report. It isn't from me. I'm not being negative. I have often, sorry, that's been really rude, it's children. I have often phoned First Contact, and I don't know whether you're aware of what's happening at the moment, in that people are actually being told, members of the public are actually being told, there's nothing they can do. They don't do door knocking anymore. That you need the children's date of birth and name. Now, I think this is a failure, and I'm putting out there now that this needs to change. Thank you.
I'm sorry, Chair. I'm well aware of what Ofsted says, and I know what the position is. I think it's been quite clear that whatever areas for improvement have been suggested, that children in Middlesbrough are safe, and the decisions taken by the front door are entirely safe. It's very unfortunate that the council is trying to use an anecdote to suggest that there are issues. If she wants to discuss that separately, I'm more than happy to talk about that to her and to involve officers. But I don't think you can apply from an anecdote, which is unsupported by evidence, and use that to suggest that the evidence that is in front of us, from Ofsted and our own officers, is not correct. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Next question is for Councillor Mick Thompson from Councillor Halawi, Selective Landlord Licensing, North Ormsby. Councillor Halawi.
I'd like to pick up on Councillor Thompson's report on selective landlord licensing in North Ormsby, where he describes specific advantages where individual residents were supported, and these cases are really impressive in their success. Now we're looking at rolling out the scheme to the Gresham area of Newport Ward. And at the moment, there's a consultation process in the Newport Ward regarding the introduction of selective landlord licensing next year. A strategic and operational consultation team has been created, and the consultation will include a significant number of local businesses, landlords, residents and key partner agencies. I would firmly encourage all concerned to complete their feedback consultation forms. This scheme offers huge advantages and rewards to any area in which it's introduced, and this is evidenced by wide research in numerous areas where the scheme has been rolled out, including local areas such as Hartlepool. Subsequently, there have been some negative reports and untruths, in fact, spread in the press and social media. And I feel obliged to correct some of these pieces of misinformation and to really stress the advantages both for landlords and residents within the scheme. For landlords, for example, they're supported with property management. This includes a free tenancy reference service, property advertising of empty properties. Landlords are given support in dealing with tenants. For example, recently a landlord was helped to secure a backdated sum of £3,000. Landlords are offered specific training to help them deal with tenancy issues, for example, how to serve a tenancy notice. Property values have actually increased as a result of selective landlord licensing. And actually landlords in North Ormsby feel very positive about this scheme. And I could quote quite a lot of landlords who've given their evidence and testimonials. One says, for example, I'll just say one, he says, I can personally see the difference to the area and the type of tenants being supported. Houses generally look better. As a comparison and to show our faith in the improvement of the area, this group of landlords are currently working on refurbishing 8 properties in the Ormsby area, whereas across the town, they're refurbishing 1 such property. The tenants are greatly supported, and they are living in houses which are safe to live in as a result of the inspections. And I'll come back at the end to this point. Tenants are given support with housing issues, and this helps sustain tenancies and prevents transience across the area. Tenants are given early help, and this means they're referred to different services, maybe around mental health, drugs, alcohol, domestic violence, and there are huge benefits to tenants. They're also given a dedicated point to deal with issues such as antisocial behaviour and other associated issues. There are a team of 6 full-time workers who solely commit to providing the best possible outcome to the residents and the landlords. There are enormous advantages. And just a few statistics from the first 24 months of the North Ormsby scheme. 93% of residents are satisfied with their home as a place to live. 87% of those that rent their current accommodation are satisfied now with the landlord. There's been an 18% reduction in the number of empty properties. 19% reduction in the number of properties that have been empty for 6 months or longer. 38% reduction in housing turnover. House prices up by 16% on the previous year. 17% reduction in antisocial behaviour, and in the whole borough it was just 1%. In the Thormsby, 17%. All properties are inspected and offered early intervention support to help them become a stable home, and they also offer chances of employment to tenants to help them find work and have a healthier lifestyle. Now, in the Gresham area of Newport, this is a real opportunity. On top of the opportunities in the Thormsby, we're looking to work hand in hand with the university and the construction of the student village so that residents and students will all be able to live in a hopefully collaborative and enhanced society. I feel really passionate about this scheme, as you can probably tell, and I feel really proud to represent the wonderful and diverse community which Newport actually is. And I'm so hopeful that this scheme will proceed, and that this scheme is our very best hope to make a significant and lasting improvement in our area. It's not a panacea for all the problems, but it is a clear opportunity to take advantage of a scheme which seems and has been proven to provide success. There may be drawbacks. For example, the scheme can only last for 5 years, but any disadvantage is really overwhelmingly dealt with by the major advantages. And I'll just say finally one thing. There is an inspection process of properties which reveals problems on a scale of 1 to 4. 1 and 2 of the problem areas are really significant. Number 1 is serious risk to life and limb of tenants. And before the selective landlord licensing scheme started in North Ormsby, it was thought there were 6 properties which were at level 1 and 2, the serious level. In the event and after the inspection, it was found that there were 700 properties dangerous at the level of 1 and 2. This alone, to me, would be an overriding consideration to progress the scheme. It can make a huge difference to the security of the life and the life of individuals in the whole neighbourhood, and in fact, therefore, to the whole town. It's so significantly important, valuable, and a fantastic opportunity. We want to make our neighbourhood a better place, and a better place for the whole town, for the residents that live in it. Thank you. Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to Councillor Alawi for the question and raising these important issues. She's obviously done her research, and I know that she is a very, very vociferous advocate for some sort of regulation and control in the ward that she represents. And I know that she's not alone in that councillors from that ward who face significant challenges see this as an opportunity to try and turn some of those challenges around. I was disappointed but not surprised when I read comments in the local press and a complaint from a landlord who didn't feel that the charges were justified. And that will be dealt with through the consultation. But it was very clear to me that that individual had the wrong information, and his complaint wasn't based on evidence, and hopefully we'll be able to work through that. I really do hope, as she does, I'm sure, that after this consultation there is broad approval, and there wasn't overwhelming approval in North Ormsby. I can remember being challenged by private landlords who saw this as a burden on their business and that it was unnecessary. Interestingly enough, those complaints died down very quickly when landlords realised, and again the landlord who made the complaint in the local press said that tenants were the problem as much as the landlords, and I have to accept that that is often the case. what happens with the landlord licensing and the whole regulation and the oversight that comes with that is the support for landlords with difficult to manage tenants. And that you've highlighted those. You've highlighted those in detail. So I really hope that the consultation process results in people seeing the benefit of this. We will talk to landlords who are not happy with the charges. They're actually significantly less than in neighbouring authorities. They are more than people were charged in North Ormsby, slightly more. The reason for that being that the work that goes into supporting the landlords and the early intervention stuff that you mentioned is at significant cost. It's very resource intensive and results quite often in us having to take out litigation, and that is a costly experience. But I hope that people see the benefit. I hope that they sign up to this and we get it approved, and I hope that we then start to see the significant improvements that we've seen in North Ormsby. I end on this point, and she makes it as well. It's not a panacea. It is a very important contribution to turning around those challenging circumstances, but it's not an end in itself, and there are other things that we need to do. But thank you for the question.
Thank you, Councillor. Moving on, next question again for Councillor Thompson is from Councillor Walters, the glass ceiling. Just before you stand, Councillor Walters, can I remind members that you do only have 2 minutes to make your comment or ask your question. I've been a bit generous so far this evening, but we've still got quite a few questions to get through. So I would ask that members please respect the Constitution and do try and keep their questions / comments to 2 minutes. Councillor Walters.
Thank you. It's to comment actually on the glass ceiling, which was an event, a very absolutely thoroughly enjoyable celebration of the work of local suffragists who were supported also by thinking men who worked to achieve political representation for women and by women. The production involved a team of local volunteers working with professionals. It was an outdoor event in the rain. It was fantastically successful. Funded by local authorities and the TVCA, and it was a model of possibilities in terms of collaboration, culture, and happy celebration of the things that we've done, of our history. So, just to serve notice, we're looking forward to marking and celebrating the election of our first women councillors next year, and we will expect support from everyone.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Thompson.
I'm grateful for the councillor for highlighting what was an absolutely fantastic event. I was there with my daughter and in fact my granddaughter, and I think if culture does anything, it should at least give us pause for thought and make us think. It certainly made my daughter think about the trials that those women went through to achieve that vote, and some of the things that were, I mean, the force feeding, and women from Middlesbrough as well, so there was that local connection, that those appalling things those women were subjected to, but their determination to achieve what they'd set out to achieve was commendable. And I think that my daughter went away with some interesting thoughts, and I'm sure that that when the opportunity comes to vote, that she will make sure that she does, and she'll remember those women who gave her that opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Next question again for Councillor Thompson, and it's Councillor Halawi again, neighbourhood safety. Councillor Halawi.
Thank you. Regarding the neighbourhood safety report in Mick Thompson's report, it was about the Hate Crime Week, which took place between the 13th and the 20th of October, where the community coordinator and the prevent coordinator from the council worked to deliver key messages which were widely disseminated throughout that week. There was an explanation of what constitutes hate crime and how to report it, and this was circulated to community hubs, Middlesbrough College, the College of Art and Design, Middlesbrough Community Learns, and to all primary and secondary schools with a message and request to them to deliver the report to all pupils. The presentation should have been delivered to all pupils in the town. This issue of hate crime is crucially important for us to deal with in this town, and I personally have had considerable dealings with hate crime in the community which I represent, and I'm very grateful to the service provided by the Police and Crime Commissioner, which is the Victim Care and Advice Service team. There are difficulties, and we are facing them in our town, and we are facing difficulties locally and nationally with the rise of the extreme right in our society, and I think we need to be really vigilant about safeguarding our residents from the negative and destructive influence of such groups with their fascist discourse. We as councillors and citizens have a clear duty and responsibility to promote diversity, to counter hatred in whatever shape or form it presents itself. I believe that we as a British people are welcoming and not hostile. I believe that we want to help and not reject. And I believe that we are compassionate and we are not cruel. Would Councillor Thompson like to add his comments, please?
Thank you very much, Councillor. Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Chair. I was at a meeting of the Local Government Association in London last week where we discussed the rise of the far right, and that group of councillors came from across the political spectrum. We heard stories from Luton, and we heard stories from Leeds and from Birmingham, and some real concerns about the rise of fascism and the rise of the far right. And I was very proud and pleased to be able to say, without being complacent, that in Middlesbrough, across the political spectrum, we will have no truck with, we will not allow the presence of fascism and people who spread hate and try to divide communities. And I'm confident that I speak from people across the whole of this chamber in saying that. If you just step outside this door into the lobbyway, you'll find a commemorative plaque to a group of men and women who travelled across to Spain from Middlesbrough to fight fascism in a foreign land. And I pay tribute to those people. I was also at Stockton a few months ago to celebrate the Battle of Stockton High Street, where Oswald Mosley and his black shirts decided to march through Stockton, assuming that the people of Stockton would join them and cheer them to the rafters. Well, they were mistaken on that one because they were chased from the town, and rightly so. And let's say to anyone who has similar ideas, if you want to come here and spread hate and fear, and you want to encourage the sort of bullying that we saw, the young man recently on social media, a young boy, a Syrian refugee who'd escaped appalling circumstances in Syria, only to find some young bully, some young fascist who decided he was going to give him a good kicking. Appalling. Turned my stomach. We will not allow such events. And again, I know I speak for people across this chamber, and I repeat the words that those men and women who set off from here to Spain, when it comes to fascism, racism, and racial hatred, no passaran.
Thank you, Councillor. Next question is for Councillor Lewis Young from Councillor McCabe. Housing Sites Update. Councillor McCabe.
Thank you, Chair. Mainly it's your section 2 on page 1. I've been going to the consultations of the Stainsby development. Stage 2 is a vast improvement on the first stage. A little bit disappointed on the speed limit you're allowing to go through at 30 miles an hour when we're trying to get the speed down to stop accidents within the town. That being 30 miles an hour and the chaos that's been on the A19 tonight that I've spent 45 minutes in, that would be a nice little rat run to run through. So maybe a consideration of a 20 mile an hour speed limit there would help, considering it's going to be for families. Also, in the consultation, there was one thing I would like to say is the Mandale area. You're looking at building on there. Would another option be, don't do anything, just leave it as it is, put your road through, plant some more trees like we did on Sunday, over 200 trees on our meadow, and make it a more beautiful place to be, and perhaps the houses, when they're built, will sell a lot quicker. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Young.
Thank you, Chair. I'll take the 20-mile-per-hour suggestion back to officers and I'll come see what they say. As for Mandale, we've always been very clear that we've had that area's been allocated for housing. We have significantly reduced the number of houses in between stage 1 and 2 as a result of residents engaging in that consultation. I'd like to thank a lot of residents for engaging constructively in that consultation because they have shaped the master plan. But like we said, we have allocated for housing. We've been very clear that we want that area to be housing. But we have significantly reduced it. We have also, as we said in the local plan, allocated the Stainsby Country Park as a strategic priority.
Thank you, Councillor. Next question is for Councillor Denise Rooney from Councillor Hubbard, Parks and Recreation. Councillor Hubbard.
Thanks very much, Chair. It's in relation to Newham Grange Leisure Farm developments. It states throughout October, the farm welcomed an increase of 84% more visitors compared to October 2017. Now this does seem an impressive increase in the percentage. What we do lack is the devil in the detail. So could the executive member please provide the actual footfall and the amount of take-ins for that month, please?
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Rooney.
Thank you for that. Yes, I can, and I don't have them with me, obviously, but I will make sure that you get all of that detail because it is quite impressive in terms of the numbers that are coming through the door, the percentage that's referenced there, the increase in takings, and also the feedback that we're getting from the farm, which is excellent. Thank you.
Thank you. Next question is for Councillor Nikki Walker, again from Councillor Hubbard, People Strategy. Councillor Hubbard.
Thanks, Chair. Could the executive member please confirm that all staff who have consistently worked for Middlesbrough Council have had written contracts of employment? When outsourcing and insourcing services, TUPE is applied correctly. In a redundancy scenario, appropriate consultation is undertaken with all staff, and basic rights such as maternity leave and pay are provided. I say this, Chair, because we understand that this has not been the case with the staff at the former Southland Centre. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Walker.
Thank you, Chair. I will say, Chair, that my stance as a council when it comes to individual staff contracts, etc., has been that there are procedures and processes in place there, and I do not get involved. I advise them to see their union representative or somebody suitably qualified and professional in HR. My understanding, though, is, and this is a broad understanding without going to anybody's individual contracts, that there are some people who were employed on a casual basis following the time when Southlands was either earmarked for closure or it was known that it was likely to close. So they were purposely employed on a casual basis in the knowledge that the centre was likely to close. So they didn't have permanent contracts. I understand that some people have engaged with those staff and give them certain advice. I do not know the detail because, as an executive member, quite rightly, I do not see individual staff contracts. I do not see what people get paid. I do not see whether they get maternity pay, etc., etc. I'm assured that the procedures are followed and that HR have a role in doing that. What I would urge the councillor to do, if there are people who feel that the correct procedures have not been followed, is to advise them, as I would have done, to contact their union representative. Hopefully they would be in a union, and if they're not in a union, to seek reliable, informed and professional HR advice.
Thank you, Councillor. I'm sorry, Councillor, we've gone over, we've 10 minutes over the allotted time already, and we have 2 more questions. So if you need to take that up, could you take it up with the executive member outside of the chamber, please? Okay. Right, the last 2 questions are for Councillor Brunton Dobson, who's not in the chamber, but if the people wish to ask the question, I'm sure Councillor Brunton Dobson will give them a written response. First question is from Councillor Mohan. Park End Primary in the spotlight. Do you wish to ask your question and get the response, or do you want to put an email to Councillor Brunton? Choice is yours.
Chair, it was just to share with everyone the excellent work that's going on in Park End School and the young children there as well that have just managed to run a chess tournament. They've just done the one show. Fantastic work there, so it was just to share that. My other question I'd like to withdraw.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Final question for Councillor Brunton Dobson or comment is from Councillor Halawi. Councillor Halawi.
It's to recognise the invaluable work that's being provided by the Junction Foundation, which is responsible for Middlesbrough Young Carers Service. This is an excellent remark on the report to say that this service is going from strength to strength and has had contact with approximately 440 individual young carers. This service looks after children who are also caring for other family members. It might be another child, it could be an adult, and this work can be draining, worrying and frustrating. The function of the Junction Foundation is to care for the carers and to make sure that they have opportunities to have day trips, for example, in the summer. Some of them have the residential experience and they get to know other young carers who share their experiences. I just wanted you to know that actually currently in Middlesbrough, we have 94 children who are young carers between the ages of 5 and 9, and 100 young carers between the ages of 10 and 14. So this is amazing that we have wonderful young individuals in our society caring for family members. And but I'd like everyone to be aware of this and to acknowledge it and to look out for any more young children that might be carers. There are information posters and leaflets delivered to schools, community hubs, GP surgeries, and other relevant organisations and community groups. So if we think there are any more of them out there that are not getting support, it might be worth looking into that for them. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Moving on, agenda item 8, report of the Overview and Scrutiny Board. I believe Councillor Story, you were going to be moving this one.
Move the report and I'll take any questions.
Thank you very much. Any questions, comments? Okay. Agenda item 9. Similar to the running order, there's a slight error. Yeah, I've got it here. There's a slight error on the title of this. The title of this agenda item. The title should be Strategic Plan Update, Medium-Term Financial Plan Budget Proposals, 2019-2020, and Investment Strategy Review. In addition, please note a proposed amendment in relation to one of the recommendations in respect of the above report. This amendment will be tabled at the Council meeting tonight. The amendment is highlighted in red. I take it everybody has a copy of that? Okay, just for the avoidance of doubt, it's the third recommendation, and it is that the Council approves the commencement of such consultations as are required for the proposed savings initiatives for 2019-2020, and notes the proposed savings initiative for 2020 to 2022, which will require further development prior to being brought forward for approval, appendices 1 to 3. Okay, with that, I'll hand over to the Mayor.
Thanks, Chair. Myself and Councillor Walker will go through this report. I know this sounds a bit strange, but item number 10, which is about the fair funding review, is an interesting background note to this. So I'd like, with your indulgence, to just make a few comments on that first. It is for noting, it's not for decision. But I think it's important and really valuable piece of work that our Tees Valley Chief Executives have done. It talks about the impacts of austerity. I feel like a broken record somehow about austerity. It compares us, as we have done in the past, with other parts of the country and shows yet again that we've been disproportionately cut in the North East and the Tees Valley in particular. It talks about the impact on other services, the police, which I've already mentioned this evening. It talks about the impact on health services and the impact on outcomes. And in spite of that, towards the end, it talks about the economic growth in the Tees Valley, of which we should all be proud, in spite of, not because of, the way that the government has cut us. So I think it's an interesting background. I hope that the government will take some notice of this in the Fair Funding Review. And again, we shall see. If we got the funding which we think we deserve and require, I think the economic growth in this area would be even faster. So if I could come on to item 9, which is the strategic plan, the medium-term financial plan, the proposed savings and the investment strategy, all in one place, which I think is a sensible way of doing it. It's very similar to last year, and I think that rather than have these items separately, they are all together. It obviously leads to quite a long report. I think many councillors spent the hour prior to this meeting going through this in some detail. It talks about how things fit with the business imperatives, the physical regeneration and the social regeneration of Middlesbrough. Some things before we get down to the detail, which Councillor Walker might do, even though I haven't told her beforehand. All the business imperative priorities are on target. The Council has received an unqualified value for money opinion for 2017-2018. The physical regeneration priorities and the KPIs remain on target. The next item, substantial item, which we will be talking about early next year, is the social regeneration prospectus, which I think there'll be lots of opportunities to add to that, to make suggestions and so on. And I think that will be a very interesting part of where we go next year. But a lot of this is about financial detail. I think paragraph 11, which shows the requirements for budget savings, is the core of this. We go on to talk about demand pressures, the national context again, government funding predictions, which are a little difficult, but we can only go by what we know. And as I mentioned earlier, the local government settlement won't appear for at least another week yet. So we of course have tried, as we do most times, to predict and therefore plan for 3 years. The further we get away from this year or next year, the more difficult that becomes, but we can only go on what we know. A lot of time and effort has gone into producing this. Budgeting isn't something which just happens once a year, as I think I've said for the last few years now. It's a constantly moving part of what the council does. It has many officers looking at implications of all sorts of things. And I would like to thank particularly the people who produced this paper today, but all the background work that goes behind it. We talk about use of reserves and balances and the investment strategy, but I think the core of this is the appendices. The first of which is quite a long list, but where we believe these cuts will have a minimal or no effect on front line delivery. There are explanations behind all of those, and I know a number of people took an opportunity to ask about those. Appendix 2 is perhaps the one which you may want to concentrate on. It's the initiatives considered to be potentially affect frontline services. Some of those have a lot of certainty involved, some of them still require a little bit further work, but I think there is a sensible explanation behind all of those. And Appendix 3 are initiatives which require further development, and that will take place before they are implemented. So that's the basic outline of it, and I'll perhaps ask if Councillor Walker would like to say anything at this point.
Councillor Walker.
Thank you, Chair. I thought the Mayor was going to cover it on. Actually, he has covered nearly everything very well. I think it's important to stress again that what we're agreeing tonight is not to agree the proposals, but to agree that they go out to consultation. I'd like to thank those members who managed to attend the briefing prior to this meeting. I know it was difficult because we had a police and crime, the police one before that, and then we got the council meeting. So stress it, we're agreeing to the proposals, keep it as a green proposal, go out to consultation that require consultation, but also that if any members have got any questions on that require further clarity, if they want to ask them tonight, we'll endeavour to do so. If we need more information from the service area, because most of these have come from the various service areas, we'd be happy to do that. So it's actually not till March, early March, until the council is actually asked to formally to agree the budget. What I have aimed to do this year is to try and it's not always been easy, to try and get things put into simpler language so people can understand them. When the slides are emailed out to members from the briefing earlier on tonight, there are links to further explanations on quite a few of them. If we put all those in the reports will go on for many, many pages. So it's getting the balance between understanding the broad thrust of the proposal and people having the opportunity to ask further questions. In this case, you can go on to further information. So as the Mayor has done, I would like to thank officers for all the work that's gone into this. I'd like to thank the officers, James and the officers, for all the work that's gone into providing a robust medium-term financial plan. Without that, we could potentially be in the position of some other authorities who've recently been in the news, who can't deliver a balanced budget, and who are verging on bankruptcy. I'd like to thank Overview and Scrutiny Board as well. I thought we had a really productive session there, and I'd like to point out that there have been alterations made to some of the proposals for clarity. One in particular, and I'm sorry, I'm going to have to move another amendment, on ECS 11 in Appendix 2. That was originally, the proposal was to cease green waste collections in October, as opposed to November currently. And Overview and Scrutiny Board suggested, why not do one collection in October and one in November? So that, what we've changed that is to have those two options, and I think we should maybe look to do that a bit more. It's often we haven't got the flexibility to do two options. In this case we have. The impact, unfortunately, my fault, hasn't been changed, so it should read, instead of will end in October, should read we'll have 2 less collections per year. So we can make that amendment. The Mayor's earlier on mentioned about the austerity, and it's absolutely right, we do that, and it's mentioned in the report, the next agenda item. And I think it would be foolish to presume that we could deliver the levels of savings that are required without pain, without any impact on frontline service. It's not realistic to do so. However, I also think recognise the work that's gone on in the service areas to as much as possible, provide proposals that don't do that. And I think, Chair, that's all I was going to say. Just to stress as well on about the 3 different appendices. And there are a lot in Appendix 1 which are deemed not to require consultation. If people have questions on that or wish to challenge that, then that is perfectly valid to do so within this period. Appendix 3, which require further development, in most of those cases, we just do not have further information on them. What we're identifying, and this is common with other councils, is who have a medium-term financial plan, is things that need further work doing on them. The members are not being asked to agree those particular savings. We'll be asked to note them, and further work will be done on them. I think that's all I wanted to say, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Any questions, comments? Councillor Rathmell.
Thank you, Chair. Paragraph 46 of the report, it starts by saying, following a review of the achievability of the proposed savings and the requirement to balance the medium-term financial plan over the period, the previously agreed contingency of 1.2 million per annum provided for 1920 2021 and 21-22 has now been removed. On that point, to date, the proposed savings for each year have never been delivered. Can you provide the details of the total amounts of savings planned but not achieved for each of the last 3 financial years? And finally, what confidence can we have that the savings for the next 3 years will actually be delivered and therefore we can remove the contingency because it won't be needed? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor, Mayor or Councillor Walker? Okay.
Yeah, Chair. I don't recognise the comment that the savings have not been delivered. In actual fact, there are reports that go regularly to the executive, which report on the progress against those savings. In actual fact, we have a very good record on delivering the savings that we've identified. There's sometimes that some things are found later not to be achievable, and wherever possible, though that effect is mitigated by the service areas coming forward with something else. I haven't got, I admit, in front of me every single one of those figures. I'll be more than happy to provide that. If the council would like to remind me how many years he wanted it over. Regard to the contingency, what we used...
Chair,
yeah.
I actually said 3 years.
Right, okay.
Yeah, out there.
Right, thank you. Thanks for your help on that. Regard to contingencies, what we used to have was actually quite a lot of contingencies within individual service areas. So part of the work that has been done in recent years is actually to, because for each of those contingencies, a consequent saving had to be made, has been to remove a lot of those individual ones and to bring together an overall general contingency. But by making that contingency, again, that has got to be put into the budget and savings made. So that is why we're proposing to remove that. If we left the 1.2 million in, then there'll be £1.2 million more of savings. But I think the thrust of the question was on the delivery of the savings over the last 3 years, and I'd be more than happy to provide more detail to the member on that and to email it out to all councillors.
Thank you, Councillor.
Just follow up. Very simple. Yeah, with regards to the savings for the last 3 years, I'm talking as an overall figure, not just picking out individual pockets. So when you provide that data and you see as an overall figure it hasn't delivered, would you then report back to full council? Thank you.
Yes, Chair. I think in the reports we always do it. We do as individual figures and then it's added up, so you get the overall picture. So I'm more than happy to do that.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Okay, no further questions, comments. Can we agree the recommendations? Okay, thank you. Okay, agenda item 10, fair funding review. I think we've covered most of that already. Unless anybody's got a burning issue with a question they want to ask on that one, can we agree the proposals? Thank you. Agenda item 11, gambling policy statement. Councillor Rostron.
Thank you, Chair. We are required to review our gambling policy every 3 years. Which we have done, and it's been out to quite lengthy consultation, and any comments that have been made, where appropriate, they've been taken on board. But the policy that you've got in front of you is largely the same policy as you approved in 2016, with the addition of some information from public health. For example, there's a paragraph about the harm that gambling can do, the harm that can bring to families and to individuals, and also a local area profile, which those of you on planning will know that we brought in for fast food outlets and takeaways, which means that when considering an application for a licence for a gambling outlet, you have to consider all the facilities in the surrounding area before you grant that licence. Now, I have to say that in Middlesbrough, the number of gambling outlets is pretty static. We haven't seen a great increase in them over the recent years. And with that, Chair, I'm asking Council to approve the revised gambling policy. If I can just say that the additions, they're on page 3, paragraph 3, and page 4, paragraphs 6, 7 and 8 for anyone who wants to take a look at them. So, Chair, through you, if I could ask the Council to approve the gambling policy.
Okay, thank you. Any questions, comments? Councillor?
Thank you, Chair. We know from the Health Authority's response their well-founded and significant concern regarding those people who are addicted to gambling. Gambling can be a significant problem for some people who are simply unable to regulate their own behaviour. It can destroy lives as those addicted continue to gamble despite the turmoil it is creating in their lives and the impact it has on families and, in some cases, work colleagues. So with this in mind, what checks do Middlesbrough Council undertake with those in charge of gambling premises to ensure that those people who have significant gambling addictions are supported to seek help? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Rostron?
Thank you, Councillor. We do obviously check licensed premises for gambling. It's part of the normal process. And there is support for people with gambling addiction if they come forward through the services that we provide through public health. And if anyone wants any information about those, I'm quite happy to give you that, Councillor.
Okay, no further questions, comments. Can we agree to approve the new policy? Okay, thank you. Okay, agenda item 12, urgent items. I understand Councillor Hobson would like to raise an issue under urgent items. Is that correct, Councillor? Okay.
Thank you, Chair. Due to the fact of yesterday's announcement regarding the airport, Chair, could I please put in a motion without notice, paragraph 61M, which will suspend the operation of Rule 63?
Okay, do we have a seconder for that? Okay. Okay, Mayor?
Thanks, Chair. I can understand this requirement. It doesn't fall under an urgent motion as far as this council is concerned, and nor is there sufficient information for us to have a sensible, rational debate about this item. It is perhaps premature, therefore I move that we reject this request.
Okay, do we have a seconder for that? Okay.
What is the motion?
Hang on a minute, 2 moments, please.
What is the motion? Because you moved it. Nobody said what it was, and now we're being told there's insufficient information. So, with the monitoring officer, please get a grip.
To suspend Rule 63.
Thank you.
The motion that was put forward by Councillor Hobson.
Okay, right, it's been moved that we go straight to vote, that we do not suspend the operation of Rule 63. It has been seconded. All those in favour, please show. All those against? Okay, that is carried. However, I believe, Councillor Hobson, you have a second issue you'd like to raise under urgent items. You have a question that you would like to ask.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay.
Obviously, this question then goes to the Mayor. Does this council support Ben Houchen's plan to take back control of Durham Tees Valley Airport? Thank you.
Mayor Budd.
Thank you, Chair. I think, as I've mentioned already, this is a little premature, to say the least. I think perhaps we can all agree, that we would like to see a successful airport. So that, I think, goes without saying. I hope it does. I cannot speak for what the council will decide. I think we need to do that in the future. So your request for me to tell you what the council thinks is again premature. 2 weeks ago, the Tees Valley Mayor talked to the local authority leaders and said there wasn't a plan. He said it was early stages, and he said before he announced anything, he would give us details and let us know what was happening. We're still waiting. I believe, according to reports, he announced something yesterday, but he hasn't told us yet. You may well be aware, Councillor Hobson, of what the plan is. If you're willing to tell me now, tonight, what the plan is, I'll be very interested. Because as I say, we haven't been told what it is yet. This is not the way of running anything. It's an appalling way to treat people, to have to read by press release or in the local media what his plan is. Now, you suggest we should support Ben Houghton's plan. As far as I'm concerned, there isn't one. There is no detail. There is no financial implications being looked at. We do not know what advice was given. We haven't seen it. We don't know who the operator will be. We don't know what the contract is, if anything. And until we can see all of those things and take those all into consideration, it will be extremely foolish for any of us, to suggest that spending at least £40 million of public money was the right thing to do. It might be, but we simply haven't got the information yet. And I think to try to do that today is extremely premature.
Thank you, Councillor. Agenda item...
Point of clarity there on something the Mayor said. He said he didn't have the information, which I understand.
Sorry, Councillor, this isn't... Councillor, this isn't a debate.
No,
this was a question asked under urgent items. The question's been asked, the Mayor's given a response. It isn't an open forum for people to get up off the floor and ask another question.
On a point that he's raised.
I'm sorry, Councillor, no.
Right, so the fact that he got a press release out first and he didn't know the information, that was scaremongering, is all I was going to ask.
Councillor, I'm sorry, no. Okay, agenda item 13, members' question time. There are none. 14, urgent items. There are none. That being the conclusion of all business, I'd like to bring this meeting to a close. Thank you for your attention. Wish you all a safe journey home. Good night.